The world is observing the International AIDS Candlelight Memorial on May 21st. What is the objective of the movement? HIV/AIDS not only threatens the health and life of the infected, but also affects their families. What can be done to support children of parents with the virus? China has taken great effort to prevent and control the disease. Is the mechanism working? HIV has been transformed into a treatable condition. Can the advancement of modern medicine eventually cure AIDS?
The International AIDS Candlelight Memorial has been observed across the globe on the third Sunday of May since 1983. While the objective of the movement is to mobilize public opinion and generate awareness of ongoing issues surrounding HIV/AIDS. And according to official data, China has taken effective measures to control the disease spreading, especially among homosexual populations and drug users. But college students should know that the rates of heterosexual transmission of HIV/AIDS are still on the rise, and better awareness about prevention continues to be vital. And to talk about these issues and much more, I'm happy to be joined in the studio by Mr. Du Cong, founder and chairperson of the Chi-Heng Foundation, and Professor Xiao Fei from the China Food and Drug Administration Institute of Executive Development. And this is our topic. This is Dialogue. I'm Zhou Yue. All right, the topic is, of course, AIDS. So how would you describe the state against HIV/AIDS, the epidemic, globally, where we are now?
Well, actually, on the medical front, I think we have made significant progress. When the AIDS Candlelight Memorial first started in 1983, I was a high school student in San Francisco. At that time, HIV/AIDS was still incurable. When you got HIV, you were almost certain.
And people knew very
you
little
die.
about the disease back then.
And there was a lot of social stigma, and my high school teacher died of AIDS around that time, and that's why I was so passionate about HIV/AIDS issues. But now, especially since 1996-97, when antiretroviral treatment was available, the life of HIV/AIDS patients is significantly prolonged. And now, people with HIV/AIDS could live a relatively healthy life, and the life expectancy has increased significantly, and now it is catching up with people who do not have HIV. But on the social level, there's still a lot of stigma associated with HIV, and that's something we have to work on, and because that impacts the psychosocial status of the people, and also the employment, school, and a lot of other daily life aspects.
Let's talk about the medical dimension of the disease first. Are we making, or are we ready to make breakthroughs in terms of diagnosis, treatment of HIV/AIDS anytime soon?
Let's talk about the history of this AIDS. Actually, the first case was a report back to 1981. By that time, just like other infectious disease, and that's a big panic happened to the society. Actually, the people did not know what's the disease come from. What's the infectious disease, can be infect other people, and what's the channel, what's the way to infect. So people try to avoid whoever suffer the disease. Actually, I remember the news report, the public pool closed, and the victim of the disease being kicked out of the hospital, and the unfortunate this case, being infected through the blood transfusion, being rejected from the school. So that's the time, very panic. But after 1983, so the scientists already identify what's caused the disease as HIV being identified. So the public is very happy because everybody think that's the virus caused the disease. We can use a vaccine. We can use the antiviral treatment to control or cure the disease.
But so far, the most effective treatment is still the antiretroviral treatment
That's right.
that we know.
We call high active antiretrovirus therapy, HAART. So combined therapy has been invented by the several, this scientists like Dr. David Hu, and he gave this idea like HEAT, HIV, early and hard, and then our pharmaceutical industry combined with our academic, found some anti-cancer drug can treat HIV, can control HIV, combine several drugs together, make this cocktail, and control the progress of the disease. So by that time, this very happy. I remember that's the time back to 1996, and during this International AIDS Convention, and everybody think we can cure AIDS, but actually that's far away from cure case AIDS.
How far is it we get there of curing HIV/AIDS? Of course, the antiretrovirus treatment is a big breakthrough, but how far is it that we can really cure the disease and keep people from getting infection?
Well, I think there are two levels. One is there's a lot of research going on about developing a vaccine so that people who do not have HIV can take the vaccine and become immune. So that person would not get HIV. So there's another level of cure is for people who already got HIV. Can it be completely curable? And both are not available options now. What we could do is to help those who have gotten HIV to prolong their lives.
But there are researchers on both fronts.
Sides,
and
yes.
which is likely to come to fruition the first?
I am more optimistic of a so-called a functional cure, meaning that we can make a person who was HIV positive to lead a healthy life, and also the viral load, that means the density of the virus in the body to become so low that it becomes
already has done that,
undetectable.
hasn't it?
Yes, but there are a few other criteria, and now earlier this year I think we have seen some more encouraging testing and results that there are people who can be treated to become so-called functional cure without any other treatment program. So I think on that front, I think it could be more hopeful in the short term.
I'll make a couple points. So in the scientific aspect, we classify cure as a functional cure or sterilized cure. Functional cure means remission. We can keep virus under control.
The virus load is very low.
Very low, but HIV is very smart. Then the 1 per 1 million HIV infect lymphocytes still around. That's what we call latent status, sleep there. And once the time ready, and they wake up and reproduce the new virus. So we have to we call the flush out this type of the as a lymphocyte. We call the CD4 positive lymphocyte. And right now, scientific research have already made some achievements. They try to find marker on those latent CD4 T lymphocytes. One scientific publication showing they have already identified 50% of those group of lymphocytes. So if we can target them, we can find them, and then we can destroy this group of the lymphocytes. So, and then we can probably realize, so-called sterilized, cure. But one successful case is very interesting. This is called the Berlin patient.
The Berlin case.
Yes.
He was totally cured.
That's right. This patient I interviewed, and I also the doctor called Dr. Hutter, and I also interviewed with, and they gave me the story. This patient is an AIDS patient, but got another lethal disease called leukemia.
Leukemia.
Yes. So this Dr. Hooter identify a donor have a genetic defect on this called the CCR5. CCR5 is a adhesion molecule, but HIV need binding like the CD4 receptor as well as CCR5 receptor into the cell, to fuse with the CD4 lymphocytes and then to get into the cell. And this group of people we call the elite controller, HIV, entered the cell because it lost 32 nucleotides and then got this protein defect. So, and after this Brown, they call the patient's name, a Berlin patient, received the bone marrow transplantation and cured HIV as well as leukemia.
But is his case applicable to other patients?
Yeah. So right now we found another new method we call the CRISPR technology. That's called the gene scissor. Scientists can use this technology to artificially make gene defects.
So at the genetic level, edit the genes of patients.
Yes, yes, gene editing. And just like we can take AIDS patients' lymphocytes out and do gene therapy, cut those CCR5 gene, and then retransfuse those lymphocytes back to patients.
Are those things at research level, or they will be put into use very soon?
Yes, that's I said no. Like in UC San Francisco group already treated 12 patients, but not use CRISPR technology, use a zinc finger, and the same way to cut this CCR5 gene, and then one patient got functional cure so far. That's 2 years already. So right now they do this. Apply this technology on the animal.
Can we say these are just exciting new development of medical research?
But it is very expensive and it is still very difficult to scale up. But we see these promising hopes, and hopefully one day it can be popularized. And to going back a little bit, the functional cure is something that we mean that once it has been achieved, then you don't need to take the ARV drugs. So you said, well, now we have the viral load to become undetectable, but that is because we have been taking the drugs every day. But in order to achieve functional cure, that can be achieved without taking the drugs. So that is something that we hope to achieve.
Let's also talk about how people still get infection. What is the most risky way to get infected now? Although we have treatment, but still people get infected every day. Is it blood transfusion? Is it sexual behavior? Anything else?
Yeah, if you look at the current HIV population in China, people who are previous plasma donors who got HIV through blood transfusion or donation still comprise a very high percentage among the population.
So blood transfusion is the major contributor?
Historically. But now, in the past few years, that has been effectively stopped or to a very minimum level. And
because of the government control measures.
Exactly. And I think for the other two transmissions, namely the sexual transmission and IDUs, are catching up very rapidly. That is the current state. But in the future, I think sexual transmission will become the main way of spread of the disease.
Why do you say that?
Because IDUs, although is a more effective way of spreading the virus, the population of people who are IDUs still comprise of a relatively small number in our population.
Not as big a population as blood transfusion people.
No, as population as people who have sex.
Okay.
We have a lot more people having sex every day than people who are using injection for injecting drug users. So the population base is a lot bigger for sexual transmission. So even though the percentage may be lower, it's still the total number would become bigger.
Is this unique here in China, or is this a global trend?
No, I think everywhere is the same.
I think go back to the history. Actually, HIV-1 have 3 major subtype. Infect the whole world. In South America, and this is the hepatitis HIV-1C, and in China, East Asia, HIV-1A, and in Europe and States, that's the HIV-1B. So they have a different, the subtype. However, this transmit is in the different way. Like in Europe or States, that's homosexual, that's gays. In China, that's drug user and blood transfusion. Let's start from those type of the lifestyle or the performance. And in South America and South Africa, that's the mother to child and this heterosexual transmission.
We'll talk about the social dimensions of the HIV disease, and later on we're talking about the social dimension of HIV/AIDS disease. You are now watching Dialogue here on CGTN. Don't go away. We'll be right back. In memory of those HIV/AIDS victims and express solidarity with those who are millions of them infected with the HIV, China observes the International AIDS Candlelight Memorial Day, which is on May the 21st this year. But we know there is a World AIDS Day, which is December the 1st. What is the difference of the two memorial dates in terms of AIDS prevention?
I remember in 1983 when the AIDS Memorial Day was first established. It was a time for people to remember people who have died of AIDS, and we make all the fancy quilts to commemorate them, and also there was a strong part of breaking the social stigma associated with HIV/AIDS. And I think World AIDS Day later on become a more United Nations endorsed public awareness raising event. So I think
talking about social stigma, it seems that still a lot of stigma associated with the disease. In this case, HIV/AIDS. What is the status now in China in terms of people's attitude towards the disease and the people who are infected with it?
We have been working for 19 years on HIV/AIDS issues. Although we see significant progress on the medical treatment side, the social stigma still impact people who have HIV and people who have family members who have HIV very deeply. One of our main people that we serve are the children orphaned by AIDS. Over 90% of these children do not have HIV themselves.
So a parent with HIV infection does not necessarily mean that you are children with HIV.
Exactly. Because some children would get infected because of mother-to-child transmission, but many of them were born without HIV. But they still got discriminated against at school by neighbors just because they have parents who have died of HIV/AIDS. So that is a big social stigma that we have to deal with, and I feel that we still have a lot of public education to do. And another issue is that we see that people who got HIV through sexual transmission are young people. Some of the people that we serve and now sponsor the education are students who are 18, 19 years old. And I remember one time that a mother came to apply for the scholarship, and then she said that my child got HIV when he was in high school, and I felt so ashamed. And he got into a very good university. And I told the mother that you shouldn't feel ashamed yourself, because it is also part of the responsibility of the society and the school. Because in our education system, we only educate our students how to get good grades and how to pass the exam. But we fail to recognize that there is a social need of our young people, especially nowadays with the internet. They can get a lot of information and sexual information. And out of curiosity, I think it is perfectly normal and understandable for young people to have an interest in sex. And we have to recognize the fact that a lot of people who are young are having sexual activities. But if we don't teach them in school and assuming that this is not happening, we would lead to more and more young people who got HIV, and that's part of our responsibility.
But in reality, that shame part is still a big contributor to many problems when we're dealing with HIV/AIDS. A lot of people, they don't want to get checked because they feel they will be discriminated against if they get infected. What can we do to change the status quo? Is it the governments? Is it the NGOs, the schools? Who should bear the brunt of the responsibility?
I give you a story and an example. I participate the AIDS Day, World AIDS Day 2 years ago, and I gave the information to my classmates. And that's a girl, you know. That's and then she wants to take on TV and watch this show, and her husband said, "That's all bad guy got this disease."
Yeah.
So that's the problem. That's the wrong. So the AIDS patient is a victim.
Because people believe only those with degenerate morals can get such kind of disease. This is many people's beliefs.
That's right.
But the truth is, a lot of them got HIV because they are poor and had to sell blood. A lot of them got HIV because they had a sexual encounter and they had no information on sexual education at school, so they were ignorant. So it is not completely any...
Or even those who are promiscuous in their lives, should we blame them
Of course
for
not.
having
No,
this disease
no.
because they have many sex partners?
We should give them care, and we should get public educate, you know, this at this point.
And who do you think should do that? The schools or the government or the NGOs like
It
Mr.
depends
Duke?
on the age of the people we're talking about. If for students, I definitely think that our education system has a very strong responsibility of teaching sexual education at school, so that our children can protect themselves, not because we are encouraging them to have sex. And that is a very important part that's missing. I think our CDC is doing a great job in treatment and also prevention and care with a lot of NGOs. But I think there is the missing part is the school education, which I think is also important.
Another thing is how the society should treat those people already infected. It was reported that students in Central China's Henan province would have to undergo HIV/AIDS tests when entering college. What do you think of this thing, and what impact it will have on the students, on their parents, on the school?
I definitely object this idea because it would lead to witch hunt and it would lead to further stigmatizations. What we should promote is VCT.
But their argument is we are protecting the majority of the people who are not infected.
No. Number one, we should promote VCT, voluntary counseling and testing. And those who are afraid of this kind of universal mandatory testing is because of the social stigma, because they are afraid to be tested. But it also has a direct connection with the level of social acceptance. If the society is very accepting, then nobody would care or mind as much of being exposed. So on the one hand, we should promote voluntary counseling and testing. We respect the rights of the people, and hopefully they can get testing themselves on a voluntary basis. And the argument is that the earlier you know your status, the earlier you can get treatment, and the longer you can live. And at the same time, we should promote a more accepting environment so that people,
because
in case find
this
out,
practice actually reinforced the message that those with HIV infection are a very special group and shouldn't be treated differently.
Isolated.
Yeah. So we should borrow some example from developed country, and actually we should make some overcome, OTC type of the test case, and let the people bring those kids back home, and they can do by themselves. But we should give them the hope that if you treat early, you can survive like normal people. And we always give them this message. You have to believe, scientific development, scientific breakthrough, and living with the AIDS, living with HIV, and wait the day being cured. So, and give them courage, give them hope, and let them to voluntarily get a test.
Our health and our Minister of Education also publicly said that students with HIV can be integrated into our education system. There's no need to isolate them, and they have the right to be educated as well. And all the schools should not kick them out of school, although it happens on a daily basis. But this is certainly not the intention of our government.
And that said, especially people in their 20s, college students, still have a higher rate of transmission and infection of HIV. There was a latest news story about students in Hunan province got 100 cases, most of them are gay men. They got infected mostly because of their sexual behavior. So what do you think we need to do? Should we worry about this new phenomena of young gay men in their colleges getting affected?
Yes, of course. But I think we should not blame homosexuality, because I believe sexual orientation is something that they are inborn, and there's nothing that we can change, and there should not be change, and we should respect people's sexual orientation. What we should do is to change the sexual behavior and make them have safer sex, and that is through public prevention messages. And also a more enabling and accepting social environment.
And let themselves treat their conditions in a very cool and scientific way. Don't treat it as something that should be shamed about.
Exactly. And also I must also stress another point is that although we all seem to see a lot of MSM, men who have sex with men, being tested positive, especially now with among university students, but if you look at the bigger picture, still a lot more heterosexual men and women got infected every day than
it
gay
is
men.
not a gay disease.
So it is not a gay disease, and they may have a disproportionately higher attention in the media, because it seems that they are more promiscuous, or they're promoting. But I think if you look at the bigger picture, we are still looking at mostly heterosexual men and women who
But the problem is how to let people every day to have a bigger picture of the disease and be cool-minded about this. We're running out of time. Thank you very much, Mr. Zhu and Dr. Xiao. Thank you so much for your insight.
Sure, thank you.
And you've been watching Dialogue here on CGTN. I'm Zoe. Thank you so much for watching. Goodbye. Thanks so much.